Russell was a empiricist, which means that he believed that all knowledge ultimately had a sensory foundation. You either needed to have some sort of experience of it by means of your senses, or a legitimate way of inferring from what you know by your senses, right? So sensation and inference from it. But sensation is the beginning of knowledge, right? Not the fear of the Lord, as Solomon said. Sensation. So man is the foundation, is another way of putting it, but specifically man's senses. Russell, being strict, unlike many non-Christians today, and consistent, realized that that being the case, what basis do we have for engaging in something like induction? Right? Induction is the process of reasoning from particular experiences to unexperienced things. The way we learn things is by generalizing or universalizing. So, for example, how many of you have been burned 1,000 times? Right? Most of you haven't. Why? Because you learn your lesson the first few times you got burned, right? You touch a stove and it burns you. You don't touch it again, right? Or you might accidentally touch it, but you don't deliberately touch it unless you really want to get burned, unless you're some sort of masochist, right? You learn from past experience. Now, what Russell's asking is, what is our basis for assuming that the next time we touch a hot stove or a flame, it's going to burn us like the prior time? Our future experience is unexperienced. We haven't experienced the future. How do we know it's going to be the same? Right? We're generalizing. What is the basis for generalizing? Well, the assumption is that nature is uniform, that fire in this case is like fire in that case, and fire and my hand touching each other in this case results in the hand being burned, so it will in this case. Okay, notice we all do this. We all extend what we learn in one case to other unexperienced cases. What is our basis for doing that? What grounds do we have for believing that nature is uniform? There's no empirical observation of that. Nobody has universal experience. Nobody has knowledge of the future. We don't see the future, right? So when we come upon a new situation, why do we believe that it's going to be like the past? You can't say, well, because it was like the past in the past, because that assumes that the future is like the past. And Russell's just being relentlessly logical here. That's circular reasoning. That's begging the question, Russell would say. And so he would say, here's an example that Russell would say, okay, so you assume that because yesterday when you touched fire, it burned you. Therefore, today, if I touch fire, it'll burn me. He says, what about the chicken, right? What about the chicken that every morning the sun comes up and it crows, or the rooster crows, and the farmer comes out and starts throwing seed on the ground. So the chickens become conditioned by this, right? Like Pavlov's dogs. The chickens get conditioned by this. And so every time the sun comes out and this farmer's coming, they run out of their coop because they realize it's time to get fed. This happens day after day after day. They're good inductivists. They're reasoning like nature's uniform. And so the next day, after the prior 100 days, they come out and the farmer comes along and this chicken's all ready to eat. And instead of feeding it, the farmer grabs the chicken and breaks its neck and then serves it up for dinner. Russell's saying, how do we know that we're not like a bunch of chickens? You know, we think that the sun's going to come out tomorrow, but it might not, right? Now, as Christians, we believe nature is uniform, but not in an absolute sense. We believe that God governs the world. God governs the world, and he's free. He ordinarily governs it in a particular way, but he's free to depart from that when he feels pleased to do so. Those are what we call miracles, not because those are instances of God acting and everything else isn't. God is governing the world every day, all days. When the sun goes up, God caused it to rise. Or I know I'm speaking phenomenologically, but when the earth rotates and the appearance of the sun rising, all that is under God's providence, right? God causes all this to happen. God is free to make the sun stand still, or however he did it in the case of Joshua. Right? He can depart from his normal method of doing things. So we believe that while the sun ordinarily comes up, one day it's not going to come up. What, again, phenomenologically, one day it's going to be the crack of doom. History is going to be over, and it's going to be the final judgment. And some people are going to be like chickens that get their heads snapped. Right. Within that context, though, we have grounds for believing in the general uniformity of nature. Our God is the God who says that as long as summer and springtime and harvest, as long as the earth continues, the sun will continue to shine, the clouds will continue to drop rain, the seasons will continue to follow each other, the earth will spin on its little blue axis, or the little blue ball will spin on its axis, all that kind of stuff. So Christians have a basis for believing in that because God has revealed himself to us. What basis does the unbeliever have for believing in uniformity? He has no basis. On the unbeliever's assumptions, this is all a chance. It's a crapshoot, right? It's time and chance acting on mindless matter. There's no basis in that context to believe that nature is uniform. There is in a Christian context.